the participants moved into the share and star steps of the exchange, they could only view and star the thoughts that were shared by the participants in their own groups. And that will be clear as we take a look at the results. You'll be able to see what that looks like. In this presentation, we'll review the demographics of the participants, the survey questions, and the main themes that emerged based on the Kirkwood School District guiding principles for reentry. Some of those themes, actually the themes do include choice and flexibility, equitable access to learning, rigorous academics and consistent communication, safety and health, and social emotional well-being. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the parents and guardians results. And just to walk you through the demographic, in each of these sections that we'll look at parents and guardians first, staff next, and then students after that. You'll see with the parents, there were 2,702 participants. There were over 3,800 thoughts that were recorded. And from those thoughts, there were almost 93,000 ratings that were provided. And that's what we mean by stars. So demographics, you can see here that we had parents enter where they had a child that would be entering school. You can see that 43% were entering pre-K through 5th grade, and that was the largest group that participated. The next largest group actually had students in more than one grade level, so it spanned beyond these demarcations. We had 21% from the high school and 9% for the middle school, parents of middle school students. One of the questions we asked were based on what I know now. We had parents select the response that was more like with their own feelings. And as you can see that 68% or 1,681 participants said that they preferred for their child to attend school in person. 24% said that they had no idea at this point, which was early June. And then 8% said that they preferred for their children to participate in remote learning. The interesting thing is from having the meetings with other area superintendents, this is very much in line with the results from other school districts where around 10% of parents preferred to maintain online learning outside of school. And then in addition, we asked a question about buses. If health guidelines limited seating on buses, how are you feeling with regard to transportation for your children, for your child? 65% of parents said that they were able to transport their own child to and from school on a daily basis. 26% said that this was not applicable, which I'm assuming means that they don't participate in bus service anyway. 9% said they were unable to transport their child to and from school on a daily basis, which means of the participants, 9% said that they would be needing bus transportation for their child. And then we did ask a question about childcare. If we continued with online learning, childcare would be a challenge. And this was pretty evenly divided. 28% of parents said it would not be a challenge. 28% said it would be a minor challenge, and 32% said it would be a serious challenge. I'm not sure what the 12% not applicable would mean exactly, but so we were pretty divided evenly among the parents who took this survey. So I think if we don't have any questions about the demographics, I think I'm going to turn this over to, I think it's Dr. Bailey. Or were you going to talk about thoughts?
Yes, and I don't know, you want me to share my screen, Ginger, or do you want to do it through yours?
I can go ahead and just open it up unless you'd rather drive and then just take over if you want to.
So just as a reminder, whenever we have thoughts on a thought exchange, you can go in and you can type any kind of thought that you're thinking about, so pertaining to the particular topic. So again, the question that we asked, what is the most important thing the Kirkwood School District should consider as it prepares for a return to school in August? And so all the thoughts that are on there, you can see that there's one of 77 pages. So there's lots and lots of thoughts that are on there. The stars that are next to those thoughts then are, after you've placed your thoughts in there, the program then comes back and says, let's go back and rate thoughts that are randomly chosen for you. Some of those containers that we kind of placed people in when it comes to where their children go to school or what grade levels they're in, help them get those thoughts to determine which ones they're going to rate. So you can see a 5.0 would be that everybody that rated that would be rating it as a 5-star, meaning super important or super valuable to me. Anything that's closer to the 1 is obviously not as important to them. You can see several of those first initial thoughts, and you can see on the thought itself where the student goes to the school level next to that thought. So the first one's from a high school parent. KHS says online learning. There needs to be actual class time meetings. Colleges did this. So there are different thoughts that are on there, and people have rated those. Again, please consider students with IEPs and special services. We're in those planning processes, really looking at adapting to online learning. So rather than go through thought by thought by thought, what we use these thoughts for are really to help us design the learning processes and the programs, and really look at what are the things that are most important to people whenever they're rating these thoughts. So again, there are a number of thoughts that you can look at, and then there are the ratings of the thoughts. So there might be 100 thoughts about KHS and online learning, but different ratings for those thoughts would show us which ones people value the most. And we can always filter those down as well. So you can see what Ginger's doing there is we could select a participant group to really zero in to determine if we need to look at things in a different way for the different levels. Obviously, there are differences just inherently between elementary, middle, and high school programming. And so this would allow us to drill that down even further to really utilize these thoughts and the ratings that the parents have given us as guiding principles for us to take a look at. And again, we have to remember that we're responsive to our parents and our students in the district, and that their input is extremely valuable for us. And so you can see all of those kind of qualifiers that Dr. Condon talked about are different ways that we can drill down the data to really utilize this in a planning process. So just by identifying high school group and students 9 to 12, we've gone from 77 pages to 34 pages. You can see the thoughts that are on there as well. And so these will all be contributing to the planning processes that we have as we continue to develop our reentry plans for K-12. And I think Dr. Painter then, these thoughts can then be kind of put into different categories or themes, and Dr. Painter is going to touch on the themes that are there as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to note that we're not spending a lot of time on specifics of this, because all of our board members and actually everyone in our community will have access to these same reports that we're looking at right now. We really just wanted to show people that you can go in and you can mess with the filters yourself, and you can look at the stars versus the thoughts on each of these reports. It's very important to note that we already have spent a lot of time on these data, and we will continue to look at these data as we develop and fine tune our plan over the next several weeks. As Dr. Condon mentioned, all of the thoughts were themed around our guiding principles that were established as a district. And I just want to point out that particularly on the thoughts, like Dr. Bailey was showing you, we always look at anything that gets a 4 or above. We look at other areas as well, and there are additional reports we can dive into. But when we look at those 4s and above on individual thoughts, it's essential for us to recognize that there are a lot of people who really felt strongly about those, and so we really need to think about it seriously. When we look at the theme, sometimes because you're averaging a whole bunch of thoughts, sometimes those 4 and above don't shake out quite the same. And so you can notice that none of the themes right now have 4s or aboves, but as you hold over any of those, you could potentially click on any of these, and this is for your own purpose when you're diving in further. And you can look and see, for example, on this theme, rigorous academics and consistent communication, here are some of the thoughts that fed into that. And obviously there are several here that jump out that are way more than 4.0 as an average. And so again, these are the sorts of things that we look at to figure out what is most important to the parents and guardians who completed the survey. And then as we dive in further to the staff and to the student surveys, do we see any patterns or consistency across, or variances for that matter, across the groups that are worth noting? I will just mention, for example, on this particular one, as you dive into some of those filters, for example, you might notice that there are a number of people who are looking for choice and flexibility, and they definitely want to be able to go back if you want. But then there are ways that you can filter that down, and you might notice that, for example, a lot of elementary parents who say, "I want my student to be able to go back to school." When you dive in at the filters, you might notice that a good number of those are also concerned about childcare, and so that's a very real concern for many of our parents. We know that, and so it's important for us to know. What Ginger's looking at right now, what you've been looking at, these are based on the stars, or so the ratings that we have there. If she clicks on the other one, the number sign, that shows us the number of, or at least I think it will, shows us the number of different, there we go, the number of thoughts that pertain to that. So for example, you might notice that safety and health, can you click up back on the star for a second? So we can just compare the two. So safety and health actually, from the rating standpoint, had the lowest of these 5 groups. But when you look at the pure number of comments that are added by parents and guardians, there's actually more comments about safety and health than anything else. And so that's just an important thing to note. And we'll actually see that again as we move into some other areas. But again, we're not showing you exactly all of the details here, as much as we wanted to give people the lay of the land so that they can go in and explore themselves if they'd like to. I think now we're moving on to Dr. Condon again as we look at some of the staff results.
So I won't spend as much time. You kind of know the lay of the land here, but we had 616 staff participants with 993 thoughts listed and 20,000 ratings. As you can see here, we were a little bit more divided, with 50% of our staff more interested in working in person if possible, and then 18% of staff preferring to work remotely. And then with another third of staff still unsure at this point. And then we did ask a question about childcare. 32% felt at this point that it's not a challenge. And then 17 and 16% felt that it was a minor or serious challenge for them. And then, as you can see, we just kind of divided up and asked the staff if they were teachers, support staff, or administrators. And that was about 68% staff, 29% support staff, and 3% administrators. And then Dr. Bailey with the thoughts.
So the thought process on this one is the same as on the parents, and will be the same on the students, that staff members were given the same question. What is the most important thing the Kirkwood School District should consider as it prepares for a return to school in August? And staff could then put the comments or the thoughts that they had, and then after they were able to put their thoughts, they were able to then go back and rate the thoughts. And you can see that there are several 4.5s or above, or several 4.0s or above in terms of the staff members. And a lot of these center around safety. And we can see those very first ones there talk about safety of the students and staff, safety of our students, and then planning processes. So again, from the lens of a teacher and a support staff member, administrator, they're looking at the safety of themselves, the safety of their cohorts or their colleagues, the safety of their students, and then what that planning process is going to be for them to be able to provide any kind of learning, whether it be in person or virtual or any kind of blended as well. So Ginger, if we're able to scroll down. So you can see again that the district level, or where the teacher identifies or the staff member identifies, is kind of in italics next to their thoughts. So you can see safety of students, for example, is elementary, safety of our students and staff, district level support, and where those thoughts are at. And when I said there are lots of 4.0s or above, you can see that we haven't even reached a 4.3 yet on our screen as we're scrolling down. So the thoughts that the staff had, again, very valuable. One thing we'll have to do is triangulate between the parents and the staff and the students to really maximize the information that we have. Again, you can put these qualifiers on that and drill down even deeper for the data. So if we were focused just on elementary, which is what Ginger did, you can see again those same thoughts shake out, and you can see the ratings that are there. We could even do elementary by childcare or elementary by where they identify at, just to continue to drill that down and look at different thoughts that are present. So these also then got themed in those same consistent themes that we use for our parent group. And Dr. Painter will discuss that as well.
Very briefly. From a rating standpoint alone, our staff was very concerned, as were the parents and guardians, around equitable access for learning. That was the #1 rating of all the themes that we had there. If we were to toggle over and just look at count, as you will probably not be surprised by what we just saw in the thoughts, safety and health of our students and staff were by far the #1 count among our staff as far as their comments that they added. So, you know, for whatever that means, I think we can draw our own conclusions from some of these things. But I think it's fair to say that our parents and our staff are very concerned that we're able to provide equitable access to all of our students, and there's a concern about safety as well across the board. And I think that if you look at that, look at the research from schools across the country and really across the world right now, you'll see those very same things. I think it's also important to highlight that social emotional health and well-being, those are separated. It very easily could have been thrown in there with safety and health, but they were separate. And so if you were to add the social emotional well-being with what I would say is probably more about physical safety and health around, could I get the virus or not? I think that those two combined would be far and above anything else that we might see.
And then I guess we're on our last segment, which would be our survey for students. And this was administered to middle and high school students. As you can see, 843 participants. What the grade that you'll be in next year, you can kind of see the fallout there and where that lies. It looks like we had a lot of students who will be seniors and juniors and seniors participating in this survey. And then the question, if you were learning online this spring, how much time per weekday while you were learning, how much time did your weekday, how much time was utilized doing schoolwork? And you can see a variety of time in this time frame as well, averaging probably 2 to 3 hours, 4 hours ranges for the most part. And then based on what I know, my preference would be where 61% of our students prefer to return to school in person. 30% participate in a combination of attending school in person and learning online. And then 9% prefer to continue learning online.
So again, looking at the thoughts, and first let me just praise our students, because these are some very thoughtful thoughts, if that's a good way to put it. But for our students, even rising 6th graders all the way up through our seniors, I was just extremely impressed with the thinking and the logic and just the pieces of just the thought process they had in putting these thoughts together, that if you didn't know that these were middle school and high school students going in, you wouldn't know that reading their thoughts. So one thing for our administrators and our teachers to be very proud of is that our students did a great job expressing themselves with that. So again, we can drill these data points down, but we again look at the thoughts that are on there. You can see #1, if a student is sick, then they should stay home, which is kind of interesting because we know that a lot of students, especially at the high school level, and I can speak from experience, will power through something because they've got a big test or they have something they have to study for, or they've got a game that night and they can't miss school. So we need to really work on that. And I was guilty of that in high school as well. During the basketball season, I was amazingly never sick ever. So it just worked out that way. A lot of fluids, I will say a couple times, but you can see what our students are really looking at. And again, you can drill down that participant group to look at different grade levels and different questions that we have. So our high school students, we can drill that down again. And then you can even look at 12th graders if we wanted to. So you can see that our students really do value being in person and also some mental health aspects. And I know when Dr. Painter looks at the themes, we'll see some of those things arise as well. But again, impressed with the thoughts that the students put down. They're very cohesive and very insightful and very useful for us as well, because these are the students that will be living this the most, including our elementary students, that these are the ones that will be in the school setting working through these pieces. So they also then got to rate, and I'm glad that they actually took that very seriously as well. And we didn't have just whatever clicking. So we had lots of good ratings from our students as well. So we're very proud of that input that we got from them. And again, a big shout out to their principals and their teachers for really working hard with them so that they can be good at expressing themselves in this manner.
Okay.
I will add on to that praise and just also mention that I think our parents have been with these students for the last 3 months, and they're probably having conversations a lot with these kids about what's going on. And so I was also incredibly impressed. I think we were monitoring because we just weren't sure what was going to show up when our students started taking the survey. We hadn't done a thought exchange with students at all, and they took it seriously and did an incredible job with it. I think the themes, again, you'll notice that the many of the same things are here. If we were to toggle over and do the number, safety and health, again, jump to the top. I will also point out, though, that social and emotional well-being jumped dramatically on this one. And when you look through the thoughts, and I do encourage people to go back and look at the thoughts, there were numerous conversations about the impact that this pandemic is having on our students. They were expressing this. They do not like being isolated. They do not like having their extracurriculars and their sports. They do not like not being with their friends and their teachers. There were definitely comments that talked about how they feel like they learn better when they are in school, many of them. There were also definitely comments that talked about how we need to be able to differentiate, and kids need to be able to find ways that they can learn in school and or online. But they definitely, they get it. And I was so impressed with their comments.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Bailey, Dr. Painter, Dr. Condon. Any comments or questions? Ms. Shern.
Okay, so I want to first say thank you for explaining this because the process, because I received a lot. Well, I saw on social media parents were having conversations about the process and thought that it was kind of difficult to navigate. Gave them a feeling of being on Facebook, but I think the way that you explained everything, like, probably should add some type of relief for them. But my question is, with all this information, so what's the next step? I know we're probably waiting on Dr. Ulrich to get in, but can you give a guesstimate of when parents should have choices, at least to kind of know what the plan is for going forward, or if there are several different options that we're choosing, and then like what will be the next way to engage parents after this survey? Are we talking about any type of like a committee being formed with parents on it? So like what's next?
Right. So I know that Dr. Ulrich has embraced the timeline of mid-July for having a plan, just like the other superintendents in the St. Louis area. I think just as the example that we utilized with the KECC plan, where we reached out to KECC parents to run the plan by and to get feedback from families, that same process will most likely be utilized with the plan that's developed. We for sure will want to have the plan vetted by someone in the health field, but then we also need to get that input from parents. And so I would imagine, and I don't want to say something that Dr. Ulrich is, because I know he really does want to hear from our community, and whatever form that takes place, he'll develop that. But I would imagine we'll follow a similar process that we did with the KECC reentry plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Condon. All right. Miss Andrews.
Real quick, I just want, with regards to, parents and their feedback on this on social media, one of the things that I think is important for us to understand is the response rate on our different types of survey. Do you mind getting us the information on when you send a survey out, like a typical survey, and then the response rate versus this? thought exchange survey. Do you mind getting that to us?
Well, just from a historical perspective, as a person who launches most of the surveys, we have anywhere from 1,100 to 1,400 responses from parents on any given straight survey where you're just answering some questions. And so we've not seen these types of numbers of participation in our surveys before. And I think if we do this again, we should definitely do like a video to Ms. Shern's point, to maybe help explain it a little bit more so they understand. It's not that, it doesn't really matter what the rating is. I mean, we're gonna look at all thoughts. It's the only way that every voice is heard so that we don't, I mean, when we've done where we left comments after Prop A, which was a pretty emotional time for everyone after the failure of Prop A, we did an open-ended survey. And my staff took an entire week to gather those thoughts and put them into themes. This took me maybe 24 hours to do just with me. So I think that it's a great way to listen and to make decisions based on true voices and drill down into some of those specifics.